A Supreme Court justice has died. The president has a chance to replace it. How does that affect immigrants? We'll listen today on Immigration Wednesdays to find out how. Hi, I'm attorney Jeff Peak, and today's Immigration Wednesdays theme is what happens when an immigration Supreme Court justice retires or passes away, like Ruth Ginsburg recently did, and the president replaces. I had a staff member ask me, Jeff, how is this going to affect the average immigrant? And let me tell you how. We've had no less than 3 decisions that I can think of here recently that have had a major impact on immigrants and how it can affect their lives and process. One is most recently was just this summer. We had University of Regents of California, the Regents of the California University System versus DHS come out with a DACA decision, which basically gave the president the right to undo DACA, but saying essentially that he had to do it in the right manner. That had a profound impact, or could potentially. It's still kind of playing out in how the president is deciding to handle it. But that was a somewhat short-term victory for immigrants, but a long-term potential loss. Interesting to note that essentially left the question of, does the president have the power to institute a program like DACA? Basically implying that it did. It didn't rule against the president's power to create a program like DACA, which has interesting implications for the upcoming election. Obviously, if President Biden were to win, for example, Vice President Biden were to win the presidency and take office in January, it's potential that he could further implement programs like DACA and presumably have the backing of the court on that issue. So that's one case example. We also had a decision back in 2018 called Pereira. And the Pereira decision, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that completely right, basically was a rebuke of immigration and how they were processing a form called a notice to appear, which is how they initiate removal proceedings, deportation proceedings against immigrants. And basically held that they had been doing it wrong. And that led to a short-term victory for immigrants in removal proceedings, many of which attorneys were able to close their proceedings and file motions in the immigration court to attack those documents to have a defense. And that's still playing out in the courts as we speak. But that was a pretty big victory, again, handed down by the Supreme Court of the United States. And then we go back a little bit further. One of the biggest decisions in my career in the last 20 years was the Padilla v. Kentucky decision, came out in 2010. That still has implications even today, and that decision held that immigrants who are in the criminal justice system have a right to be advised by their attorneys, even though they're criminal defense attorneys, of the immigration consequences of any guilty plea or punishment that they're taking. It's a due process right that everybody's guaranteed by the Constitution to have effective assistance of counsel, and part of that effective assistance and good representation is letting me know, hey, if I take this plea deal, if I take this probation or this jail deal, are they going to kick me out of the country? Is it going to affect my papers? Will I be able to get status in the future? And that was a pretty big decision because many immigrants over the years have been poorly represented and not been explained those consequences, and had pretty devastating consequences to their families and themselves as they've been blocked from being able to get status, or in some of them potentially permanently blocked from ever being able to legally be here in the United States. And I've seen that play out. So that was a huge decision. Many immigrants have been able to reopen and appeal cases and fix those situations under the guidance of really talented attorneys. So that's just 3 examples of the Supreme Court crafting decisions that affect the daily lives of millions of immigrants. And so when we think about, okay, well, how is the president selecting a new Supreme Court justice going to affect me? Well, it can affect you greatly, but potentially because he's forming ideologically the person who's going to be on that court will make decisions that will be followed by lower courts and even the immigration courts for years and years to come. Now, notably of interest, I'm not to make this terribly political, but both of those 3 decisions that I mentioned were made by a court that is slightly leaning to the conservative side, on the right, most would say. And all 3 of those decisions came out favorably on the side of immigrants. So I don't know what that means. I'm not trying to read anything into that, but it's just an interesting commentary on how the selection of Supreme Court justice even affects the daily lives of any average immigrant. So as we sit here and wait to see how that plays out in the coming weeks and months, hopefully we'll be praying for all of us who believe in prayer. We'll be praying for the appointment of a fair and just jurist who will have hopefully a very sympathetic heart to immigrants, as this nation was founded by immigrants, and really a respect for the rule of law, as it's important that laws are interpreted and implemented justly so that we all respect them. So that's today's Immigration Wednesdays. Just wanted to give you my thoughts on that. So if you're back home thinking, how does the appointment of Supreme Court Justice affect me, an immigrant? That's exactly how. So now you know. Hey, we'll see you next Wednesday. If you need any help, feel free to reach out here at the Peek and Tolan Law Firm. We'd love to help you. See you next Wednesday.